Well, hey, everybody, and welcome to the Debrief with your friends here at Sandals Church. I am your friendly host, Stephanie Shaper, here with our fearless leader, Pastor Matt Brown, the PMB.
Yes.
How's it going?
Very, very good. Glad to be here. Super excited. Good to be back. Enjoyed my break. Back from D.C. Do not like cold weather at all.
Oh, yeah, no, me either. I don't do cold weather. So.
And apparently spring. Don't like that either. So.
Why don't you like spring? It's not
because I almost died. I had an asthma attack.
Oh.
Yeah, we were walking underneath the Cherry Blossom Festival. Oh, this is beautiful. So and then I almost died.
Oh.
So spring in D.C. or spring anywhere?
I think pretty much anywhere. Yeah. I think I've become acclimated to the desert. So, yeah,
my
tolerance is dust and smog. Those are the two things I can handle. If there's anything blooming, I'm dead. So
fair enough. Well, here on the Debrief, we are kicking off a 9-week series all about the Enneagram. We are joined today by two of our friends who are highly gifted in the style of the one. So we're excited to dive into that today. So we've got Bethany and Brian here today.
Hello. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we're going to dive into that. If you have not yet had a chance to listen to the first two messages in our series about you, the first one called Why You and the second one all about the style of the one, make sure to check those out. Those are going to give you some great context for this episode as we start diving into these 9 different personality styles as we learn to get to know ourselves and love ourselves a little bit more.
Yes.
So with that, we've kicked off and sent out a self-discovery assessment to the masses. If you listen to our last episode, you got the link for that. You can find that at move.sc/self-discovery so that you can start to learn your type, which is going to help you as you walk through all these episodes. But folks are starting to send in lots of questions as they've taken those assessments because you get a lot of information about yourself that can be a little hard to process. Mm-hmm. So let's just dive into a few of those logistics really quick. One of the things that you get are both healthy and unhealthy scores on each of those types. Pastor Matt, can you talk through exactly what that means?
Yeah, so it means exactly the way it sounds. There are some aspects of your personality that you operate in a healthy manner. So that means good, right? True. Every aspect, every number has amazing things that reflect the glory of God and the goodness of God. And so what that means is when you are healthy and you're doing things that reflect God, it's good things. There's good aspects to your personality, and we want all of these personality types within our church. The unhealthy is the propensity that you go to the negative sides of the personality, and so you do things that are not healthy or loving or kind, or really are sinful in your personality, and you tend to use your personality style in a negative way. And so that's what it means. And it simply means the higher the number of healthy and unhealthy is, the more likely or less likely you are to use your personality in a healthy type or unhealthy type. And so don't be freaked out if your unhealthy scores are really, really high. My unhealthy scores were extraordinarily high, which is why I paid $10,000 for counseling to really, really work through these issues, because I hadn't dealt with a lot of the wounds in my life. And so just know this, God created you beautiful, but the reality is we're born into a sinful world and we become broken. And our parents, as much as they loved us and as hard as they tried, we developed some adaptive styles to our personality to try to fit into the world as we experienced it. And so here's the thing is, you can do things as a child that work as a child, but then you become an adult and those things don't work. And so you have to do one of two things. You have to change, or you have a midlife crisis. Those are your two choices. That's where you're heading, to the point where you realize your strategies for life don't work, and so you either crumble and become a total child, or you crumble and you change. You say, okay, God, I want you to redeem this brokenness in me. And it's just okay. We're all broken. We're all sinners, even the ones who are here today that are better than the rest of us. We're all sinners. We're all saved by the glory of God, and we need to embrace that and celebrate the fact that God is reflected in our personality and can be glorified in our personality as it transforms and changes and we become more like him. So no matter what number you are, and I don't want you to refer to yourself as a number. I say I have a lot of 3 in me. I have a lot of 7 in me. Occasionally I have some 8. But within that, what I want to do is I want to have Jesus change the way I think, act, and feel. I'm always probably going to have a lot of 3 in me. That's how God's designed me. But as a 3, I need to think, act, and feel more like Jesus. And so I need to move in that manner so that I can be healthier for myself, for my relationship with my family and my kids, our church. Otherwise, you become an absolute mess. And so, part of being a Christian is changing and saying, God, I want you to change. It's not just what I believe about God, but it's what I believe about myself. And so that's part of what it means to be a Christian. And that's why so many Christians aren't changed. They never grow. They're not any different, because all they've changed is their thinking about God. Well, that's not going to always change you. You have to you have to change your thinking about yourself and say, okay, God, what do you want to change in me? It's not just your belief about him. It's your belief about yourself and your behavior. So, and that needs to reflect and interact. So That's what healthy and unhealthy means. And so just go slow. Don't panic. I know it's a lot of information. We've worked really, really hard to make it as simple as possible, but it's really, really scary at first. And again, this is your first step into beginning to understand yourself. And the good news is you get to take you wherever you go. So you have some time to get to know yourself. And, as Tammy and I have walked through this, it's been amazing. Her Enneagram journey has not been as long as mine. Mine's about 15 years. But really in the last 3 years, watching her get really, really serious about this and watching and being a part of her reflecting about her beauty and her brokenness and being able to be part of both, it's been really, really great. And, to come alongside her because she has some unhealthy one in her where all she sees is the negative, and to be able to say, well, okay, you're like that sometimes, but you're not always rigid. You're not always these ways. When you get uptight or scared or worried, yes, you tend to go to this in an unhealthy way. But here's some of the beautiful aspects of your personality. And here's some of the things that I just love and appreciate. And to be able to speak that into her, because especially ones are so self-critical, they need, I think, a loving, kind voice to speak truth back into them about who they are, because they just see flaws. And it's tragic because they're some of the most beautiful people in our church and some of the most amazing people. And I love them so much. And I get excited when somebody scores high on the one on our personality assessments, because we know they're going to get their crap done. And some of the other personalities, not so much. So, so one may not always be a joy to be with, but they're going to get their stuff done. So we appreciate that.
Oh, that is true. So we've had a lot of people even kind of freaking out or panicking a little bit. Like I have a lot of unhealthy scores, or I have a lot of high scores. Like,
yeah, welcome to life.
Yeah. All right.
And that's just the thing is, I think a lot of us live in this fairy tale land where we truly believe we're healthy because we compare ourselves to the news or to our drunk uncle or, our
crazy friend.
Yeah, our crazy friend. And so, okay, they're not the standard. That's not the picture of health that we compare ourselves to. We compare ourselves to Jesus and ultimately who he is and what he's called us to be. And so what that means is we got a lot of work to do and we got a lot of changing to do. And just know that if you put in the time, you put in the effort, I believe God will meet you there and he will supernaturally help you change. As you continue to confess these unhealthy aspects of your personality as sin, that's what they are. To sin means to fall short of the glory of God and say, God, this is not who you've called me to be. This is not what I want to be. And I want to change this. And, when you embrace your personality, here's the thing is you're not going to confess this once or twice or 10 times or 100 times. This is going to be a lifelong journey because this is part of who you are. And, many of us have been operating in a very unhealthy manner for a long time. And so, we all want the instant miracle. But the reality is, like, if you just simply try to tackle something like losing weight, that's a major obstacle to overcome. It requires a change of thinking, a change of acting, right? Exercise, and a change of eating. I mean, that's just literally losing weight. Now let's try to adjust your personality. And I think we all want the chiropractor version, right? Where we just sit down and crack, and then, okay, we're good. But even in that, right, you don't go to the chiropractor once. You go back repeatedly for multiple adjustments because as human beings, we tend to get out of line and we need to be brought back. And so we need to notice that in ourselves. So,
Yeah, and Pastor, is it true that a high unhealthy doesn't necessarily mean kind of holistically unhealthy, but it might be kind of situational, or if you've got both healthy and unhealthy that are high, a little bit situational, or at times you can be unhealthy, but not to read that to mean that you are holistically unhealthy.
Right. So you need to look at the gap between the two scores. And so again, there are people in our church who are coaches and they can come alongside you. So if you have a score where, it's 99% unhealthy and 5% healthy, that's something to look at. What that means is right now in your personality, the way you're expressing yourself to yourself and others is not good. And that gigantic gap. Now, most of us are not going to have that. Most of us are, our scores are going to be, somewhat close. But if you see just a gigantic gap, there's a schism there and you need to say, okay. And also just know, did you take the test? How were you feeling when you took the test? I mean, Tammy and I did this coaching with another church and the pastor had his wife take the test for him. I'm like, this is not helpful. So don't take the test the way you want the answers to be. Take the test as real and as authentic as you possibly can. And so look at that. And what I would say is don't be afraid to press into unhealth. Like if you have cancer, we don't need to pretend that you have, I don't know, athlete's foot. Here's a cream, and in 2 weeks you're done. We have to really attack this. And so if there's something unhealthy there, don't be afraid to say, okay, this is a problem. So my unhealthy score for my 3, when we went to counseling 2 years ago, I think was 98.9. That's a problem. That's a really, really bad problem. Specifically, as we get into the 3 who struggles with lying and deceit, what it means is I was not honest with myself, my wife, or anybody else about how I was feeling. I was not walking in truth. So I needed to deal with that. And I remember in the middle of counseling starting to get an eye twitch because the truth starts working its way out, whether you like it or not. And I really thought we were there to deal with Tammy and her unhealth, and then realizing, wow, I've really got some issues that I need to deal with and some painful places. And we all have these places. And here's the thing. Jesus wants to go into those places with you. He wants to sit there, bring healing, and let you know that he loves you, he cares about you. And again, back to, the one's favorite verse, Matthew 5:48, be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. What he wants is wholeness and completeness. And so the way you become whole and complete is by inviting God into your imperfection. Okay, God, here I am. So a good verse for the ones is 1 John 1:9. If we confess our sins to God, he is faithful and just to cleanse us of all unrighteousness. That's a great verse for a 1. If I confess my sins. So then what does John go on to say? If we say we have no sin, we are calling God a liar and the truth is not in us. Whoa. I think John met some ones, some non-resourceful ones, and so some non-healthy ones. And so we need to invite God into that and say, okay, Lord, I'm going to bring you into this area. And the truth is, man, you typically have arguments like in your marriage with your kids because everyone's operating according to health. What tends to bring those issues up is our sinfulness and our brokenness, and we don't know how to express them or deal with them, or we get frustrated. And so nobody's perfect all the time. So just understand that and rejoice if there's some healthy scores there. Really rejoice. Okay, wow, I do this well. I tend to do this well. I would use the word tend because I don't always operate unhealthy, and I don't always operate. Did I say unhealthy? Mm-hmm. I don't always operate healthy. I tend to do these things because, right, that's my personality. I tend to find myself in these situations. So if I want to change, I need to acknowledge that and work hard to change that.
So on the unhealthy scores, one of the things we've been learning in our training and as we're doing more research is that with the 1 uniquely, when you have a really high unhealthy score on the 1, that can tend to kind of skew some other things. Can you talk about that? And maybe Bethany and Brian, maybe your experience and how you've seen that play out in your scores, but what exactly does that mean?
Yeah, so the first thing that you need to look at as you take the score is go immediately to your 1 score and look at the unhealthy number. So if it's 60 and above, that means that your unhealthy 1 has a high influence on your personality.
Maybe 79.
79, there we go, yeah.
1, if you're me.
So that means it has a very, very high impact on the way you took the test. So what that means is as you're taking the test, you're going to have a tendency to answer the questions not how they actually are, but how you think you should. So let's say you're a 3, which your core sin is lying, but you have a high non-resourceful 1. That's going to be really hard for you to answer, yeah, I have a tendency to lie because I shouldn't do that. That's wrong. So I'm going to answer the score. I'm going to answer the test in a way that's not accurate, and that can skew the test. So you want to look immediately at the non-resourceful 1 score and see how that impacts it. That doesn't mean necessarily that it does that, but you need to be aware of that a high non-resourceful 1 can negatively skew the test because, like I said, you're operating based upon, this is how I should be. Mm-hmm. And again, so you should all over the test, and now there's a problem. So you guys want to answer that?
Yeah, have you seen that at all in your results?
Sure, yeah. I think in mine, it really played out in the 7 because I have a 0.7 on 7, so less than 1 on my 7 score.
Like you should.
Yeah. And I think that's a lot of, hey, you shouldn't take a break, you shouldn't have fun, you shouldn't jump into whatever the enjoyable activity is that's going on, which is interesting because they talked in our training a bit about if that's kind of your situation, some high unhealthy 1 with some really low 7, to actually start with a 7. Mm-hmm. Figure out how you can introduce some healthy 7 into your life before you worry too much about the unhealthy 1, right. Which is really kind of how that played out for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have any extremes on mine. My 7 score is a teeny bit higher than Brian's. I have a whole
You have a higher
like
than 0.7?
6. I have a whole number at least instead of Brian. But my 4 is not a whole number. And so anything that is high for emotion or for, things that maybe fall out of what the bounds of what should I think is the norm or the safe zone, I don't stray out of that. And I think you can see that on all my results.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's just absolutely amazing. So just pay attention to that. And again, I know some of you are going to feel overwhelmed, and just know that you're going to learn this as you go. And there's people here at our church who want to help you. And these are baby steps. Baby steps. Don't be afraid to be a beginner. And this is your first step into understanding yourself and how God's wired you and how God wants to help change and enhance the way he's wired you. So again, we're about change at Sandals Church. We're all changing. We're all growing. And this is just a beautiful tool to help you begin the process of being real with yourself. So don't freak out.
Yeah, and beginner can be kind of uniquely tough for the one, because we're so afraid to not do it perfectly that sometimes we'll withdraw and not do it at all.
Oh, yeah.
And so for us, it's important to even just take that first step, begin to make some small changes, even if you're not going to be perfect at it. Be a beginner.
Yeah, and so here's the beauty of the test. Like, basic, you said your 7 score was really low too?
Oh, yeah, it's like 5.
Okay, so ones have a hard time relaxing and having fun, and because they have to get all these things done. So here's how it helps you is rest and play is an important part of life. And so if you're not doing that, you need to tell yourself, I should have fun, I should rest, and I should play. So use that 1 to help you enter into those and tell yourself these are good things. Like having fun with my family, being out, enjoying, relaxing, going on date night like you did. Those are good things. Like that's actually productive. And so it's really forcing yourself to see, okay, I need to do these things because it's good for me and it's who God's called me to be. And especially on the test, if we see an extraordinary low number on any of the scores, we want to pay attention to that. We want to look into that, because we want to have all of the numbers reflected somehow in our personality, because all of those numbers in a beautiful way reflect the glory of God. And so that's why, again, I like this test, because it doesn't just pigeonhole us, but we're allowed to kind of embrace and touch all of the scores and say, okay, here's an area where I can grow a little bit and I can have some more fun. Or if your 4 score is really low, I can work on feeling and connecting. And, because, right, part of connecting with God is emotional. It's not just regimented. And so as a 1, I'm going to lift my 1 hand in worship as I walk into the holiest of holies.
Both look so uncomfortable right now.
Yeah, right? And that's okay, right? It's okay to do that, because feeling God and experiencing God through emotion is not unsafe. It's actually an invitation.
Yeah.
So.
Or even, I think, diving into creativity with that 4 of like, oh, I want to try this, but like, I'm not good at that. Like, I'm not going to do that well. I'm not going to accomplish that well. What is being creative going to look like? And like my husband's a really high 4. So he's like, oh, super creative. He's like, you're creative too. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm not good at it. Like you are good at it. So therefore, because I have a lot of 1 in me as well. So it goes like, oh, I'm not good at that. Like,
and that's really, if you're a 1 or have a lot of 1 in you, you really miss out on so many things, because you evaluate joy based upon whether you're good at it or not. So you as a kid, you might really enjoy soccer, but you're not good, so you don't play. But you liked it. And so, whereas the 4, right, they're on the team, they, whatever, having fun, or the 7, celebrating everybody. So the 1 evaluates joy based upon really excellence. Am I excellent at this? And so they tend to fall into things not necessarily that they enjoy, but that they're good at. And so that's why a lot of 1s find themselves in professions like engineering, and you'll see these, right? They just kill it in school. And then all of a sudden they're an attorney and they're going, I hate this. What happened? Well, you just followed your ability rather than your passions. And so as the 1, you got to be really, really careful. I'm good at this, but do I enjoy this? Does this bring me joy? And so is this something that I want to do? And so especially if you have kids that are 1s, they're going to be so drawn to what they're good at, but you have to measure that with, do you enjoy it? Does this bring you joy? Because, right, your career is what you do every day, all day. So you need to find some level of satisfaction in what you're doing. And I always feel like pharmacists are all 1s. Like when you go to the pharmacy counter, it's just the tomb of joy in there.
But you want that level of someone who is on their game.
I want a 1 picking out my drugs for me.
But I want somebody that's passionate about chemicals and getting it right. I just, right.
And measurements.
They just look like they just scored really, really well on math and chemistry. So they're back there and they're trapped in a white coat. And I'm just like, I love you guys.
That was also me. I spent all of high school planning to be a doctor because I was like, oh yeah, I'm good at these. I'm good at math and science. That's it. My parents love if I'd be a doctor. And then I'm applying for college and trying to pick a major, and pre-med wasn't an option. So my mom said, oh, you probably want to choose like biology or chemistry. And I was like, ugh, I hate those. And thank God for my mom said, you probably shouldn't be a doctor. If you hate those subjects, that's all you're going to do.
Yeah.
And so she actually helped redirect me because I think I would have just gone down that path and probably hated my life. Been good at it maybe, but hated it. So it's interesting how that works.
Yeah, you can be brilliant and be an artist. It's okay. Embrace it.
So now let's dive in specifically more into the one and talk about just what are some of the key characteristics of the one? How does that tend to play out? What have you guys learned and experienced as you've dived, that's not a word, dived, I don't know. As you've learned more about the one, what are some of the key characteristics of the one, Pastor Matt, or you guys?
Yeah, again, we've sent out, if you take the test, there's a great summary that we've put together for you, and it's literally, I think, 2 or 3 paragraphs, and I think it's really well written. I didn't write it. We had a team that really worked hard to communicate to you who the one is. So the one is the reformer, and they see the world as it should be. And that's a beautiful thing. I mean, God sees the world as it should be, and he's bringing, the kingdom of God. When Jesus says the kingdom of God is near, what he's saying is I see something that you don't. And so that's the one in Jesus, right? I see something that you don't, and he's going to bring reformation. He's going to bring change. That whole idea of resurrection is that we can be something more than we are. And so that's the one at its very best, is seeing the potential in themselves and people, and really seeing the possibility of better. Now, the negative of that is perfection. So the ugly, I don't want to say stepsister, the ugly
duckling.
The ugly duckling, thank you. The other side of that is, the perfection and criticism, constantly being overwhelmed by the flaws and what's wrong. And so it becomes debilitating because the world is never right. And so, we were in small group last night, and my wife has this weird thing that she does, and she's always done it, and it's just constantly reorganizing the furniture, like moving things around. Like, I remember when we first got married, I'd get up in the middle of the night and run into a sofa that wasn't there. I'm like, what? Where did this come from? What are you doing at 2 a.m? And she said last night, she said, I think maybe the reason I'm constantly moving the furniture around is because it's never right. And for me, man, if she dies tomorrow, I live in that house 40 years, that chair is not moving. I don't care where the chair is. The only reason it's moving is if it needs to be vacuumed or it's burned to the ground. So, but I thought that was interesting for her to have this moment of part of her anxiety in her house is it's never perfect. Well, guess what? It's not perfect. And so rearranging the furniture gives her the temporary satisfaction of it's better. But that doesn't last. And so she's constantly, and she said she's been doing that since she was a kid. A little kid moving things around. And again, so OCD, can come out of that, excessive compulsive disorder, constantly making sure everything's perfect, and which it never is. It never is. And so you really need to look into that as you dive into trying to organize the world in such a way that it makes sense, it's fair, it's equitable, whatever. So again, the reformer sees things as they could be. Martin Luther, not King, our wonderful social justice warrior in America, but Martin Luther, the priest, the Catholic priest, saw the beauty of the Catholic Church and how it could be. And so, he nailed his 99-point thesis on the wall of all the things that the Catholic Church needed to change, and they didn't respond maybe as well as they should have to that. And so just know that, a reformer is a beautiful person, and they exist within the community to help make things better, and that is their gift. That's their role. As a society, Japanese are great ones. They literally, as a culture, make things better. Like the whole culture moves to, America's invented automobiles. Here we go, and we're better. So it's just amazing. Whole cultures can take on a persona, and the Japanese culture has that high functioning drive for excellence, beauty, and better. How do we make this better? Super organized, super clean. Just a very, very, and we see some of that in German culture. You see it in British culture. Just very, very organized, regimented. Everything is where it should be and as it should be. And you don't see that in a lot of cultures. You don't see like a lot of ones like in African culture or other places. I mean, things are just wherever they are. So it's an organizing putting things together. Things go in their place, and that's a good thing. And again, I thank God for our ones in our church because they tithe, they give, they serve, they're here. They do what they're supposed to do because their core motivation is to do what's good. And I think it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. How have you guys maybe seen some of those characteristics play out in your own life?
Yeah, I really love that we've adopted the idea of the reformer, because in my life, I feel like where it gets a little bit unhealthy is when there's a lack of patience. And I think a lot of times the one can have a lack of patience, and that's marked a little bit more by that word perfectionist. When you take a perfectionist and you turn it into a reformer, that opens up basically time to be patient.
Right.
So, I can see this better version of the world or this better idea of how we could approach or tackle something, but now I've introduced some time. I can be patient with myself. I can be patient with people because we're reforming towards it, as opposed to this notion that it's got to be perfect, which means it's got to be perfect now. And if it's not, I just might blow my top.
Right. Yeah.
And that's kind of that unhealthy side. So the part that's really resonated with me a lot over the last handful of months is this idea of looking at myself more as a reformer than as a perfectionist, which reminds me to give people room to be human, myself included. Like, we are human. We are not these robots that are going to magically do the perfect furniture layout in the living room and get it right. So me, that's been a big difference in understanding what a one is like as a reformer.
Yeah, and for me, I don't know that, I guess I could say that, yes, I'm a perfectionist, but the reformer to me resonates more because when I see everything in a room or in people or at work or at home, I see all the details that go with it. So whereas you may see, like, you just see your living room, your wife sees, oh, well, this invites, like, I could see how your wife maybe gets hung up on how the furniture's laid out or what it means when people come over. So it's almost like this scroll unrolls anytime we talk about, like, pick a subject, pick a topic, or a process at work isn't right, or when I'm at home, like, this needs to be fixed. And so I get lost in those details. The problem is for different people is that maybe that's just one thing that's noise to them, but I can see there's like 9 things in this room right now that maybe are just noise, but they all have the same level of importance to me. And so I can get lost in red flag, that all need my attention, which works to my benefit here in the workplace because this is my job to take care of details and be on top of them and to care for them for other people. The problem is when I let it regulate me and I get lost in just running after all the things that need my attention. And so finding the balance of, and then also learning to let go and be like, it doesn't matter because I decide that all those things have the same volume level, not that anyone has told me that everything has that same volume. And so learning to just let go of, it doesn't all matter.
Right. Yeah, and it certainly isn't all equal importance. Let me ask you this question. I think the challenge for the one in the workplace is delegation because you can do it better. So how do you struggle in trusting things to others to and allowing them to not do it as well as you would do and not just take over? So how do you do that? Because you have to lead through others, especially in the church. We have to, you two are in positions of leadership, right? We equip the saints for the work of the ministry. So we have to allow people to do things better. How is that for you? Is that anxious?
Yeah, very much so. I actually remember a couple of years ago now, probably, you made the comment, you have to allow people to do it not as well as you.
Yeah.
And I've remembered that for the last couple of years. And I think for me, I try to do a combination of accepting that along with patience and coaching.
Right.
Because that combination allows you to believe we can help each other move towards that kind of ideal perfection, reformed state. You don't have to give up on it. You don't have to say, it's just all going to not be done well, according to, my great standard for whatever that means. But you can kind of combine, a freedom to let that happen with some coaching, with some patience, and we can all kind of learn and grow. And I find that combination, at least when I'm doing it well, to work well, and when I'm not, it doesn't. So.
I'm awful at delegation. I'm aware of that. It's a key issue that my supervisor and I are working on, but it has, as I sit in this right now, allowed me the opportunity to practice what I'm not also good at, or what I need to be better at, which is coaching. And so, so maybe this didn't go well, but it's an opportunity for me. If I'm so good at this, then let me show you how to be equally as good at that. And then we can walk through that together. And so rather than it sit in, oh gosh, this is awful. Okay, how can we walk through this together? And so it's a learning experience for us both.
Yeah. Well, I think ones, though, are great at systematically helping others to be better. You guys think in systems, you think in steps. And I actually think that's very, very helpful for other personalities. Whereas me, I'm more of an intuitive leader, just kind of gut. I don't have a lot of wisdom in terms of helping people come to the same conclusions that I do. But whereas like Claude Hickman, he does our preaching and teaching seminars, and he is much better at systematically walking people through the steps, and he has a lot more one in him. I mean, mine's like non-existent. And so I just think that that's how I would encourage all of our ones, is that you make great teachers because you think systematically and you can help bring people along through steps. People need steps. If they don't just naturally understand it, and that's the beauty of the one in helping reform others and bringing people to a better place. And that's just the beauty of the one. Whereas some of the other personality types would be like, just get it done. Just get your stuff done. Whereas the one is, here's how we do it. Here's how we organize it. And great systems and great cultures have been raised on those things. Here are the steps. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5. And
at our best, we believe people can work through those steps with us and be better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So one of the things that you mentioned a lot in your message on the one is that the one reflects the goodness of God,
right?
God's order, God's justice, God's goodness. How can ones, and maybe all of us even, work to embrace that goodness, that justice, that doing the righteous side of God without becoming then overly legalistic and self-righteous? Because I know that can be a temptation for me. Like, well, I just need to set up the right rules, and then I will do well in these things. I will be good.
I think for most of American history, ones have been in charge of our religious systems. So they ran Catholicism, they ran Lutheranism, they ran Presbyterianism, Baptists. Ones are not in charge anymore. They're not. And we've completely shifted from moral truth to feelings. And so now everything's about don't judge, everything's about follow your heart, and we're a mess. We're a mess culturally, we're a mess religiously. Nobody understands moral truth or goodness anymore. And that's why every group needs a one in the group to say, yeah, maybe we shouldn't all get drunk. Maybe we don't wife swap. Maybe that's that's not according to the Bible. And ones are that great anchor, and I think they need to unashamedly understand that somebody in the group needs to speak up for truth and for what's right, not about what you feel, because a lot of the counsel we're getting in our world today is follow your heart, and that's bad advice. Now, where the one needs to remember, right, is it's about the soul. It's about the soul. And so we were talking last night. It was so funny as we were talking about the prodigal son coming home. And, my wife has such a hard time with justice. Well, it's not fair. And I just said, okay, so, he got a party, he got a barbecue, but he came back with VD. He lost everything. He's dead broke. He has syphilis. Like, the consequences for his sin, what it took him to get to God is hell. So he got a party. And he's in heaven. Like, sin works its way out in our lives. And so you don't need to worry about accountability because, right, sin brings death. I mean, there's things in that young man's life. He has no inheritance anymore. He's a son, but he's broke because everything is the older son's. And so God is ultimately fair and right and just. And I just think we can get caught up on the one feels like they need to sit in the seat of God to make sure that according to their perspective, the bill has been paid. Well, he paid the bill when he was broke eating with pigs, and he's naked, and he's, the story doesn't say he has venereal disease, but I'm guessing.
The Matt Brown translation does.
I'm guessing when you dabble with the prostitutes, you get the benefits. So, he was wrecked, and the older brother should have allowed that to be enough and celebrate that he came back. And so I just think it's really, really important that the one not be so guided by their principles and morals that they can't see the person. And so I think the rest of us really need to appreciate and celebrate the ones who do the right thing, because they have this rudder. God has placed do you know what a rudder is? So on a boat. So let's use a car. God's given ones a steering wheel, and it works. A lot of us have no steering wheel in our car, and we just kind of go wherever, the road takes us. But ones know how to turn and steer, and they know what's right. They drive on the right side of the road. They stop at stop signs. That's who they are, and we need that in our culture. And so what we need to help ones to see is, yes, you're right, but the person matters too. The father says, yeah, but your brother was dead, and he's alive. So I think that trumps your sad feelings over not getting a goat with you and your friends. So I think that we need to do that. But again, I don't want ones, because they're so critical of themselves, to feel beat down. And especially in a church like Sandals that's so grace-oriented, we have to make sure that we don't silence the one's voice. They need to be heard. Now, in some churches, they're too loud. At Sandals, that's not the case. They need to be heard. You need the people in your group that actually know the Bible, because most people don't. They don't have a clue as to what the Bible says. And the ones know it, and they follow it, and they believe it, and they trust it. And again, they don't pray a lot about obedience. They just are obedient, and they follow God, and they trust God, where the rest of us are trying to find our heart to worship God. And just, the ones in church, whether they feel like it or not, because this is where I'm supposed to be.
So specifically for a 1-2, one of the questions that we've gotten in, and I think you even said someone asked you this on Twitter, what does it look like for a 1 to experience love?
Yeah, well, I told you guys, I have 0, 1. Well, it's not 0. I need to go back and look at my score. I have very, very low 1. But somebody asked me that on Twitter, and I thought it was a great question. How do you love a 1? Because it can feel a little frustrating to try to love a person that, no matter what, maybe it's not good enough. So when do you guys feel loved?
I think for me, I'm aware of every detail to everything all the time. And so while I love that to serve people on their behalf, because I've taken care of the things for them that they maybe don't even know that they need, is that it never, it a lot of times feels like no one is attentive to me as I am to them. That's my deep, dark secret of.
What's your wing?
9.
Okay.
And so it's hard for me to always be on it and always be taking care of all the things. And then we go to give gifts and someone's like, oh, here, I bought you something that I picked up on the way here.
Yeah.
And so, it feels so wow, deep, dark secrets out on the debrief today.
Yeah. One's exposed.
Right. As it would be really awesome if someone had a level of detail and attentiveness to me that I feel like I have to all the things.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always, and while it's not usually a big deal, it's one of those things I think if I really felt like you were paying attention to me and the things that were important to me and not oh yeah, here, I had this thing, here you go. That I would feel like, oh, you saw me and you know who I am.
Does that resonate with you at all?
Yeah, it does. And as I was thinking about it a bit, I think for me, it's also a lot about having a patience for inviting me into or to come off of that track that I'm on, that I'm constantly running to do things, get things right, get things done. Whether it's my wife or a couple of friends who are kind of, let me pull you into something fun. Let's go do something. Let's get off that track for a little while. And just know that for me, it's hard to get off the track. So if you invite a 7 to go do something, they might already be there before you finish inviting them. But for me, it might take a little bit more to say, hey, and then a little bit of time to get engaged in whatever that is, to kind of insert that joy or kind of rest or that type of thing.
So you can say, I really am fun.
Yeah, I really am fun, but you might take a little bit to get me over there because I also got these 87 things that I feel like I've got to get done.
Yeah, I've even noticed I identify a lot with one. It's not my highest. I'm a hardcore 9, but I've noticed even ways that Tyler has loved me is by cleaning the house and getting things ready. So it's hey, now you can relax with me. Yeah. Because he always wants me come hang out, chill on the couch, and I'm looking at every single thing in the house. Oh, that needs to be picked up, that needs to be washed, that needs to be cleaned. And there have been days where I come home and the house is clean. It's yeah, come relax with me. I took care of this for you, so that I know you will actually relax and actually hang out with me and not sit there on the couch, leaning forward, wanting to stack the dishes that's over here or do that. And so that's one way I've really experienced love, is by him noticing, oh, these are the things that if these are in order, she's actually a lot more at rest and more likely to be fun. So,
Yeah, I think so. I relate to all 3 of you. I work with all 3 of you. So I'll just start with Brian. Brian, I feel like you feel loved by me when I specifically call out and I say, I really appreciate this about you. So it's very specific.
Yeah, very much so.
Okay, so it's not a general, hey, I like you. It's, I value this in you. Bethany, I feel like you feel loved by me when I recognize when I recognize you don't like me nearly as close to you.
Yep.
Yeah. So I recognize I make you uncomfortable when I'm this close. So I'm going to see you and step back. I feel like our friendship started to grow because you felt seen and acknowledged.
Yeah,
and
you were attentive to what I needed.
Okay. So for you, your oneness is a little more challenging for me. I'm trying to think. how do you feel? I think it's harder for me because your one is not as dominant. How have you felt loved by me in the past?
I think you do a good job of noticing and recognizing when like I see things that you don't, or when I was your assistant, like you did a really good job of recognizing that and saying like, oh yeah, like thanks for noticing this, thanks for taking care of that, like, and just noticing the things that I noticed that like I thought would just kind of like, oh, I just did my job, and you're like, oh yeah, like thanks for doing that.
Yeah, your 9 is easier for me to relate to than your 1, but I know the 1's in there because there's a lot of I've seen that.
Yeah, the one's what helps my 9 not be as like, oh, it doesn't matter because I'm like, oh no, I should do that.
Yeah. I think you do a better job of relaxing than these two, though. That's the 9.
Yeah.
So
that's the 9's like, I don't really feel like it. I'm fine.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, again, just for the 1, you guys see the world in checklists and just understanding that it's okay for you to be a box that somebody needs to check. Hey, here's a need that I have. And to be honest about that and say, here's something, and expressing in marriage, especially, you're a working mom, and that job never stops, and say, her husband's name is David. Here's what I need, and I need you to check this box, and I think all of us need to learn in this series to be declarative. Here's what I need, and I think a lot of us feel like, especially as married couples, that our spouse should intuitively know. We did not marry Yoda, none of us. We all need to declare and say, I need this, and be fair, right? Because your spouse is not God and they can't meet your needs all the time. But in friendships and relationships, and just say at work, here's what I need. And so, because the 1s will run themselves ragged to cover for everyone else. And so then we're no good when all of our 1s are dead. So, because nobody can do it all. So.
But we can try.
Yeah. You can try and.
Make our best effort.
Right. Get closer than most of us.
And so, but then what happens, right? What's the core sin? So it's anger. So then you're pissed at everybody all the time. And you're angry because nobody works as hard as you, and they don't, and then you're not telling them because that would be wrong, and it would be wrong for you to, and then then you just snap and quit.
How does he know us so well?
Yeah.
Well, actually, sorry, can I go off?
Yeah,
course?
go off.
There are rules to this game.
You can do it.
We have a 1 going off road.
You had asked me the first time what I had identified with, and I told him it was a 1, but I don't feel like I'm angry. And I sat in that for a long time trying to sort through because I didn't feel like I identified with the anger. But I was doing some more research and reading is that resentment actually, it like just hits a little closer to home. Is that, well, mostly probably because I feel like anger is a strong emotion and we won't ever wade into the really strong
your low
emotions.
4 won't allow you to feel that.
Yeah. But resentment is something that seems like it just simmers, and so it just holds. And so that I identify more with is that I'm resentful that I always have things to do, and how come you don't? Or how is it that you can suddenly decide that you're done, but we're not done? The list is never done. And so that is what is hard, to not impose the rules that I have self-declared on behalf of everybody else, because I've decided that all these things matter, but no one else has. But I'm upset with you.
Yeah.
I resent you that you're done and I'm not.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I originally had a hard time with the word anger as well, because I've never characterized myself as angry. I've never kind of exploded, or, what you might assume was a sign of anger, but kind of worked my way towards frustration, resentment, that type of thing as well. And those are probably just kind of synonyms for the word we don't want to associate with ourselves.
Anger is bad.
Yeah, that's no good, clearly. Frustration can pass, but anger's not good.
Yeah.
So we actually had a really interesting question in from a couple of different people. Both Wendy and Sam wrote in, separate people with separate children, who noticed that they both seem to be raising children who exhibit a lot of 1 in their personality. What does it look like to parent a child who seems to exhibit characteristics of that? I don't know if you guys have kids that are 1s or.
Sure.
You have to deal with the heart. And so I remember, Tammy and my wife's father was an alcoholic. And so when we got married, she made it very clear that alcohol was something that was not going to be in our home. So I didn't drink alcohol at all for, I think, the first 12 years of our marriage, not a drop. And one time at a party, like a friend's party, I had a sip of something. And I just remember Madison, my daughter, looked at me like I had murdered someone. And I thought, ooh, we're raising a 1. Like she doesn't understand scope, scale. And so for right 1s, everything's illegal or legal. Like there's a line. There's no gray. It's black or it's white. And so really speaking into her heart and beginning to manage her heart and trying to get her to see people, principles, rules, the heart issue rather than just what's right or what's wrong. Because, at the end, right, the good brother does everything right, but his heart's wrong and he's not going to heaven. So steward their heart and really try to get to their heart and help them get in touch with their feelings, what's happening, what's going on. And so my mom is a 1. My daughter's a 1. My wife has a lot of 1. So I have a lot of women around me with real high 1s. And it's how to connect with their heart and finding they have 1, right? So finding it.
They keep telling us that.
Yeah, finding it and stewarding that and making them comfortable with those things. Because again, for the 1, right, feelings and emotions are very unsafe because they're not as you can't control them. They're not, they don't always do what you want them to do. And so then, right, that's wrong. That shouldn't happen. I shouldn't feel this way. I shouldn't do that. And so just really helping them to embrace kind of, even within a 1, even within their heart, they're not always decided. So how do you help them be honest about, wow, I could go a little evil here, because we all have that, and we all have that escapist mentality. We all sin. We're all a little drawn to the dark. And so how do you help them, kind of tap into that? And so for the 1, one of my favorite scenes in the last Star Wars movie, and I thought was brilliant, is when Kylo Ren, all of our Star Wars people are going to love this, there's this thing where he's standing before the dark Sith, and he said, I did not tell you that as you pressed into the dark, the light would grow. And so that's the wrestling of Han Solo's son. The light grows. Well, for the 1, as they press into the light and what's good, right, and true, darkness also grows. And so how do we deal with that? And so how does that manifest itself in the good brother? He refuses. The darkness has been growing the whole time. It's been simmering, and it comes out with, I'm not going to heaven, and you can't make me. And so if you read The Great Divorce by C.S. Lewis, which is one of maybe the greatest Christian books ever written, there's this highly unhealthy 1 who's a mother, and she demands that her son leave heaven and come with her to hell. And if he loved her, he would do that. It's crazy because he's violating his commitment to her as a mom. So she's created a rule. That scene is just, woo. But so just know that as a 1, even though you're better than the rest of us, there's still darkness in there. And you have to really, really make sure, Jesus says, be careful that your eye does not turn to darkness. So if we think we see clearly, but it's become dark, man, and that's why, you think about I don't want to pick on Islam, but Islam, right, is a highly regimented, right, wrong religion. And yet many of them blow up people and kill children and do terrible, awful things. Even 1s can get really, really crooked and wrong. And so, you can have an abortion activist that kills a doctor. Well, what just happened here? Your 1 went completely, crazy here. So, and in the name of right and what's good and true, you commit evil. So you got to really, really watch that. So I just would, again, say manage your kids' hearts. Any of your kids' 1s?
My daughter is leaning that way. She just is more highly emotional than I am. And so I've had to be super conscious in what I lean to and what I'm comfortable with and things that maybe I've taught her as far as how we do things, which she's taken on. But I don't want to stifle the fact that she swings high and low and she feels strongly and feels passionately. And even though I don't want to create a life for her where she doesn't feel comfortable being able to express that or express that to me. So I have to work really hard for her and for me to be okay with the fact that she wants to be up in my business and like a cat, and that she wants to,
which is hilarious to me. If you guys knew Bethany, so not like.
And I have to work really hard to sit there and be like, she's going to need counseling. It's going to be okay. We're going to sit here together and have this moment because it's important to her.
Yeah. And she feels loved by you when she cuddles.
Yeah. And she wants to talk about her highs and talk about her lows. And sitting and talking about feelings is my love language. Yeah. And so being super cautious that for her, because I grew up in a home that we didn't talk about anything. We didn't talk about how we felt, good or bad, ever. And I, right now, am currently having to work through what that means to me as an adult, what it means to me as a wife, what it means to me as a parent. And so having to purposefully adopt behaviors that are good for me, but are good for her. Yeah. And so it's work. It's not always comfortable. And I have to take a minute sometimes and deep breath. It's going to be okay.
Yeah.
It's going to be okay.
Yeah. Your kids are awesome. How about you?
Yeah, I've got my son has got a lot of 1 in him, and I think one of the things I try to be careful to do with him is not place too much demand or kind of make him into a trophy. And I think that's one thing we can do. If we have a child who's a 1 and maybe they're pretty good at some things, either A, we ignore them because, hey, they're fine. I got these other kids I got to go
Right.
worry about. And then they're kind of off isolated. Or we turn them into our trophy and they become the, my child did great at whatever, bumper sticker. And before you know, you're kind of parading them through your friends and look how and no child can kind of live up to that standard. And it really creates, I think, this inner conflict where they don't know how to live in the middle a little bit and not have to be perfect all the time. And so if they end up in a situation where they're both a bit isolated, so they want some attention, and now the way they get it is by being the trophy, you've kind of created a pattern for them that might end up taking a while to heal out of. So I would just say, practically kind of be careful if you get into kind of isolating or ignoring a bit or putting a great demand to be the trophy all the time. Doesn't create a lot of room to make a mistake.
Yeah, I would just say for all of our parents, the key to parenting is not trying to recreate yourself. It's trying to allow this kid to be who God's called him to be. And so I think a lot of parents, you're going to go through a season of disappointment where you realize they're not carbon copies of you. And then you have to die to self and realize they're created in God's image, not your image. And then you allow them to be, you confess that as sin and you allow them to be who they are and really celebrate them in their life. And as they go, it's what we all needed as kids and it's what our kids need. That doesn't mean they shouldn't be pushed or encouraged or, directed, but doing those things in mind that they might not be ones. So,
but also as a one, parenting and even parenting is being okay with letting my kids fail.
Yeah.
Which is one of those things is not creating carbon copies, but like failure is not an option for me as a rule. But then I have to let my kids learn that lesson, which means that I have to sit in and then teach them that it's okay to fail. And so that is the challenge, but one that I want to be a good parent. I want my children to be successful and to feel highs and lows and to know what failure is and to know what success is.
Right.
Well, and one of the parents that wrote in, and I remember even my mom saying this about raising me, is that a hard part with raising a kid who's a one is that they can be more self-critical of themselves than anyone will ever correct them on. Like they'll be way harder on themselves. I know I was way harder on myself than my parents ever were. So what does it look like to love a one who is just really in that self-critical cycle, either a child or an adult? Like how do you love someone and help walk them through and out of that self-criticism? Because I know I'll tend to dismiss someone saying like, you're just being too hard on yourself. Like, you don't understand. I know exactly the rules that I have not met and lived up to.
Yeah, I think for the one, it's just really embracing the love of God for your being rather than for your doing. So God doesn't love me because of what I do. He loves me because of who I am. And so really just trying to invite God into that heart place of that God's love for me is based upon real love. It's not like, do this and I love you. It's I love you. And so I just think for the one, it's so hard because everything is lists, and love is not a list. It's right. You love your kids, and so trying to get your kids to know that I want you to do well, but I love you, even if you don't, even if you fail, even if you're not good at everything or things are not difficult. That we love you and we celebrate. I love my son has a lot of one. We think he's taking the test this week, so we don't know. But he actually came to us. He said, "Can I take the test?" And I was like, he's a freshman. So I was like, okay. But my son just really struggles not excelling. And I'm like, yeah, I think this guy's a one. But just really saying, I love watching the struggle. I love watching you have to work on things. And, that's part of life, right? I'm not good at everything, but I got to get through life. So I got to work through these things. And just really saying that I appreciate the struggle. I appreciate who he is and loving him as a person. I think that's just really, really important. What would you guys say?
Yeah, I've actually experienced that in having kids is this real detachment between what they have done and where my love for them is. And I think a lot of that for me is kind of, I think about that moment when you're putting your kids to bed at night and nothing about what the day has held has influenced your love for them in that moment. And that for me has been a great kind of picture and reminder of, I think, what God's love for me looks like, whether I can trust it or not on a daily basis. But in having kids, that's brought a real clarity to me. Because you have some horrible days, very difficult days with kids. But by the end of it, there's no checklist, there's no balance sheet, there's no review of where they're standing. They're perfectly and completely loved as you put them to bed at night, and it starts all over for the next day. And that's helped me with kind of detaching this notion of what I'm doing with the love that God has for me. So.
And I love it's good for me to sit and like look at the moon, or when I'm at the beach, or when I'm in the mountains, is to remember how big God is and how small I am, because it reminds me that I'm, as much as I like to hold on to and think that I have control over all the things, or that I have to hold them all together, the reminder that God is so big and I don't have to be, and I'm not. And so it's good for me to pause, but that's my favorite thing usually about getting away, or just having a moment, like I'm driving home and there's a full moon, and just a reminder and a thankfulness that God reminds me on a regular basis that he's big and I don't have to be.
Yeah, amen.
So as we kind of wrap this up now, just kind of like one final question. Our vision here at Sandals Church is all about being real with ourselves, God, and others. So how have each of you kind of seen this process of self-discovery, learning about your primary identity as a one? How has this kind of helped you in being real with yourself and being real with God and being real with others? How have you seen that start to play out in that process for you?
There's a lot of pieces to this. Like Matt said when we first started, is that there's not a, hey, I'm just going to tackle this and be done. Like a lot of what I've been working through has come in pieces over the last 3 years, and different parts of me, I mean, it gets tackled in different pieces. So the first one I think that I had to work through is how do other people receive me? And sitting in that, one of the big things we do here on staff is working through that and asking people that and being honest and real about that, and being okay with the answer. Like you have to sit and ask that question and be willing to receive what comes back to you. And so I've had to pick a few pieces apart there, and okay, so this is how people receive me. That's maybe not what I wanted to be, but that's what I had to be. And then there's a part of me that I have work to do on my own, despite what people may think of me. And I'm aware, and I have to admit and say on a regular basis, that I'm a chronic overfunctioner, like to my detriment. And so can I get a whole lot done on a regular basis? Yes, but sometimes it's to my death.
Yeah.
And so I, about 2 years ago, had gotten this book from Pastor Dan Crowley, The Rest of God. And I have decided that it's something that I have to read every year, just to sit down and go through the practices, that the practice of Sabbath is not a suggestion and a reminder that it's a command for my health. And because I leave here I work full time, and then I go home, I have 2 kids and I have a house. And so there's so many other things that have to happen the second that I leave these doors. I can always have something to do. And the knowledge that rest is not something that I get because I'm done and I've checked off on my list, oh, I've earned this rest. Rest is a gift to me. And but I have to be willing to walk into that and say, the list will never be done. Today I'm doing something like sitting because I'm allowed to do that.
Right.
And I have to remember that. And the truth is that I will continue to get lost into myself unless I have the reminder that this is not a suggestion from God. This is his command to me. And that productivity is not, while it's an American value, it is not in the lifestyle that I have said that this is what I want to do. And God wants for my health and benefit and for my heart. Because if I get too caught up in all the things all the time and I get too far removed from rest, then I forget to see people and I forget to see them as people. And all I see is, you're another thing I have to do right now. And so the further I am removed from cycles of rest, the harder my heart gets. And so rest is the Sabbath and the practice and the purposeful. I am not doing anything today because it is for my health to love people. And it allows me to see people again in faces and to start sitting in feelings. And because otherwise I will just turn into a robot, and I can in fact become that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think for me, as I've gone through the discovery, Pastor Dan Zimbardi, our executive pastor, actually shared a phrase with me, the patient father. And that's really helped me to kind of frame up and understand it. I think a father has a desire to lead, a desire to move somewhere. But when you add the patience in, it helps you to not drag people along the way. And I think I've begun to see that sometimes I can put now over people. And when I start doing that, that's when I've begun to get really unhealthy and maybe push too far people or souls. And you talked about kind of running over people at times. But that's kind of really helped me understand it. And then the second big piece for me is the recognition that my barometer is off. So I think we all kind of have a barometer. The 8 doesn't know quite when to challenge or not challenge. The 9 doesn't know quite when to rest or not rest. And I think for the one, we don't quite know when to celebrate,
Right.
when to get off the track and have some fun. And so just understanding that in my unhealth, my barometer is off. And I might not be the best person to gauge when that's the right time for me if I'm not in a healthy place.
Yeah.
Just like the achiever might not be the best barometer for when have we created enough goals and reached enough goals. Like our barometers can be a little bit off in our core style. And that's helped me to understand where community fits in. You know, because if I'm not the best barometer for that, or at least as I become more healthy, I'm not, or until I do, that's when other people can begin to influence that or speak into that, so that I can have that rest, and so that I can maybe not put the priority, the perfect over the people and their health and their soul. So that patient father idea and that understanding of my barometer and the brokenness of that have been helpful for me as I kind of discover more about who I am.
All right. Can I ask a question before we start?
Absolutely.
So I want to ask you both the same question. So we'll make Bethany go first. But what, as you've pressed into this, the one has a really hard time with flaws. What's the part of your brokenness, of your oneness that's been the most painful for you? And then the next question is, what's the beauty in who God's made you to be that's been maybe the most satisfying? So we'll start negative and then go up. So, because part of the challenge of this test is as we press into this, we're all going to see some things we really don't like. And that's not just for the one. The one will maybe struggle the most with embracing it, but I'm telling you, there's some aspects to my 3 that just make me just want to vomit because it's just so ugly. So what part of your brokenness as you press in have you just been like, wow, that's painful, but I see that in me? And then what part of maybe it's more hard to acknowledge, wow, that's really beautiful in me. So, because it's both. We want people to discover both in this. So I know that's not an easy question.
Sure. Well, the one that right now that I've sat in for the last year and still is not in me resolved is I don't feel. I mean, I have feelings, they tell me.
Yeah.
But I to say that I'm not okay, or to admit that that I don't have it all together, or at the same time to say, oh, I'm not okay and here's why, or to sit with someone else who is having who is really upset, or there's not a right answer. Like I'm sitting with a few friends right now, there is not a logical progression of what's going to happen. I can walk it in and out, but it's not resolved. There's not an answer. And just to sit in that emotion, or to sit and let things be ugly and broken, and I can't fix them.
Yeah.
And I right now am working through personally is that there's always a list of obligations. It doesn't matter how I feel. It just has to get done. And the question that's been posed to me, but how do you feel? And I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Is I have to work through that, because I can't not ever be a person who can engage in community with people, or can't engage with my husband, or can't engage with my children, or can't sit in hard things because I can't actually put an emotion to it or sit in it. Because emotions to me are not logical. Like I can't process it. It just fits nicely on this shelf over there if I just leave it over there. And so like you're not a person. Like you're not a whole person in Christ. And so to sit, and part of that is me working through that with God and being honest and being able to say words out loud. Like, I'm sad that you did not buy me a good present because you didn't think about it. Or I'm angry that I am angry. I just have to say that word out loud because I'm not good at anything that's strong on the pendulum are just not safe words to me. So
Sure.
And so that to me just sounds so ugly. Like who doesn't feel? And it's hard for me to sit in emotion in general, and because it's not logical. I can't think through it. They don't make sense to me.
All right, your beauty.
Ugh, okay, good. I love what I get to do. I mean, what I tell people all the time, I'm not actually qualified to do my job. I'm just crazy in the head. And that level of craziness allots me a lot of fun. And so my job here is to work with our creative department and let them do what they do best. And I love that I get to free them up because I'll handle all the details for them to go be on stage or to make the most amazing thing you've ever seen at Sandals Church. And so I love that my neuroses allows for that level of freedom for other people. And I love that I I mean, my degree is in modern American history, and it's something that's fascinating to me. But what I'm gifted at has allowed me to do really fun things like this. And I don't know that how I would ever put that on a resume of, here is what I'm educated on, but here's really how I'm innately gifted. And I love that this place allots that we hire people who are gifted how God has wired them, and they have found for me what I think is a fantastic position to get to do what I love to do with how I'm wired.
All right.
So flaws first. I think how I've treated people over the first 40 years of life, 20 years of career, I can be very difficult to work with at times. The reality is some of that, you talked about strategies that you've used. Some of that produced great results. That's the reality. All the way back through school and career and so forth. And so some of those strategies work, but then you get to about my age, I just turned 40, and you start to really struggle with both exhaustion and with how did I treat people through that? And I think I deal with guilt over that. And I think that's the flaw that I feel the most guilt over. And what does it look like to embrace different strategies over the next 40 years so that maybe the effectiveness doesn't go away, but somehow the relationships are better and the exhaustion is less. And part of the Enneagram process has given me language to understand that I can embrace different strategies.
Right.
It is a thing, you can say both those worked in some ways, but I am also going to set them aside because they were not great. And I'm going to embrace some different strategies. And let me go figure out what those are, how they work, how do I make them real in my life. So I think that flaw, that relationship part, and some of how I feel I treated people through that is a big flaw. What was the other side? Was
the beauty.
The beauty. So it's there, right? We're allowed to have that too.
Yeah, you're allowed to be beautiful.
Okay. I think the part that I really enjoy the most is the idea of the seer. A couple of weeks after I came on staff, you actually talked about me being a seer, and that's the first place I heard that word. But that I love the beauty of being able to see maybe a bit further than others can, see some things that other people maybe can't. And in my healthiest moments, being able to bring people towards that. I love ushering people towards that beauty. It's when you get the unhealthy strategy that you're beating them towards that beauty. That is not good. But how do you help usher people towards that and have the patience and grace to get there? But I really enjoy that ability to see when it's reforming and not a burden that we're falling short of, and we will beat people into submission until we get there. I love that gift when I can use it healthy, and I'm hopeful that the second 40 years is a more healthy use of that gift.
Right. Yeah. Well, I just love ones, and let me just say to all of our ones, the great burden of your life is to see the good in you and others. That's the great challenge. It's there, but, you will have to see that first in yourself. And as you see it in yourself, you will begin to see it in others and in your kids, in your work and stuff like that. And the next is just constantly working at relaxing and having fun. I mean, that's just right. Because you'll actually be, I'm going to say gooder. You're going to be better if you're relaxed. You're going to be more efficient when you've rested. I mean, all the statistics and studies about work. I mean, you can work yourself to a point where you're inefficient. And ones can do that, where they're actually accomplishing less, but they believe they're doing more. And again, our barometers are broken. And so, so for the 1, right, 6 days you shall work, 1 day you shall rest. For the 9, 6 days you shall work, right? So it's very, very different. I mean, you put the emphasis on different parts of the sentence. But the 1 just really has a struggle to rest in that moment in God, to feel, to connect. And, I just think that's really important. But I just love our ones, and I'm just, again, so grateful. We can't function without them. They're going to feel the most exposed of the 9 personality types because they're the most uncomfortable with personal flaws. But we all have them. And we just need to embrace that and move forward. And we're all have, beauty in us. And again, the ones make the world go round. So we're thankful.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. And you guys can get the notes for this episode at debrief.show/105. We'll have the link again to that self-discovery assessment if you'd like to take that and learn about your type. And stick around after this episode wraps up, because we actually, for every single type of the Enneagram, we've got our music director, Matt Ritchie, has been writing specific songs that we're sharing in the services over the weekend. And we want to go ahead and tag that song onto the end of this episode. So stick around, listen for that. We'd love for you to have that as a little gift to our ones.
Cool.
Right?
Thanks for having us.
A place for everything in place. I see the minutes in the hours of the day. A race I can't escape, a game I cannot win. I see an end I cannot reach before the chase begins. I am loved in my imperfection. I'm good though I'm incomplete. There's grace enough for you, grace enough for me. This world can be a better place if you'd see it through my eyes. But with the fleeting fix of completed list, I'm left unsatisfied. But I'm loved in my imperfection. I'm good though I'm incomplete. There's grace enough for you, grace enough for me. There's forgiveness for faults and failures, for now and for those to come. God, give me grace to know the goodness and the grace of good enough. Someday I might be able to see my flaws as more than fatal, to see all I have gained and count it all as lost. Someday I might be able to finally disentangle the voices of the critic and the cross. I'm loved in my imperfection. I'm good though I'm incomplete. There's grace enough for you, grace enough for me. There's forgiveness for faults and failures, for now and for those to come. God, give me grace to know the goodness and the grace. I'm loved in my imperfection. I'm good though I'm incomplete. There's grace enough for you, grace enough for me. There's forgiveness for faults and failures, for now and for those to come. God, give me grace to know the goodness and the grace. God, give me grace to know the goodness and the grace of good enough.